Good evening. My name is Maya Aaron, and I'm a commercial litigator and partner with Mark Migdal and Hayden, and proud volunteer president on the Miami-Dade Board of Directors for Jewish National Fund USA. Welcome to our third annual U.S. and Israeli Innovations in the Life Sciences. During the program, you can enter into the chat any questions you have, and they will be shared with the panelists who will address them directly with you after the program. I want to first thank today's sponsors. Our lead sponsor and event committee host chair is a member of JNF's Herzl Society, a major donor to our campaign in support of Israel. Mr. Peter Feinberg serves on the board of directors at Immuneering Corporation, a biopharmaceutical company working on novel therapies for cancer and neurologic diseases. He serves as partner and was a founding member of Boxcar Partners, a venture capital investment firm with a focus on biotechnology investing, and founder of Spores Bioventures, Inc., a biotech firm that aims to catalyze the rapid and accurate development of cancer and immune disease treatments. In addition, he currently serves as co-founder of Bridge Biopharma, Inc., a publicly traded biotechnology company focusing on genetic diseases, Boxcar PMJLP, and emerging security solutions. He has more than 3 decades of experience in the financial services industry at Oppenheimer & Co., Inc., where he serves as a managing director. Our next sponsor, Axelmed Partners, is a lower middle market private equity firm focused on acquiring and investing in mature US-based commercial stage health tech companies. For more than a decade, they have leveraged their expertise to support companies across the medical device, tools diagnostics, digital health, and tech-enabled services sectors position their businesses for future growth and success. Axelmed currently manages over $630 million of equity capital and are actively investing out of their second private equity fund, Axelmed Partners II. Our final sponsor is Emerald Development Managers LP. Neil Cohen and Charles Collins began their partnership nearly 3 decades ago as investors backing early stage companies. The first 2 of these were an enterprise software company and a salt mine that they founded with additional founders called American Rock Salt, ARS. Through diligent hands-on management, they built and grew ARS into the largest salt mine in the US. ARS has returned over $1 billion to its investors and is currently valued at over $1 billion more. Today, they invest in and nurture promising young tech companies. Emerald has built a portfolio of over 20 companies with an investment focus on life sciences, enterprise software, cybersecurity, industrial technology, and sustainability. Thank you all for supporting our work in Israel. We hope that everyone watching this will feel inspired to get involved. Many of you are JNFers and have been supporting the organization for many years. For those of you who are not or have not been to a JNF event in many years, we are an apolitical and non-denominational 501c3 nonprofit. We were founded by Theodor Herzl in 1901 and were part of the organization that acquired the land from the Ottoman Empire that would later become Israel in 1948. We did this through tree plantings and raising money in the blue box, pushkas. Today, we're here to ensure a strong, secure, and prosperous future for the land and people of Israel for the next 50 years and beyond. Yes, we plant trees, but we also build houses and parks, source water solutions, support Israeli fire and rescue, and improve the lives of people with special needs. We boost tourism, support immigration to Israel, promote Zionist education and engagement, build medical centers and trauma centers, fund agricultural and culinary research. We take Americans to Israel on trips at all stages of life and operate the Alexander Mutz High School in Israel, celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. Now, please enjoy some updates from our medical projects.
Negev, Nachlat Iran, is a state-of-the-art rehabilitative village in Israel's south that was founded in memory of Eran Almog, the late son of Didi and Major General in Reserve Doron Almog. Fueled by his love for Eran, who was born with severe autism and intellectual disabilities, Doron Almog guided the creation of this expensive residential and rehabilitative complex, which provides ongoing specialized care, including every possible treatment and therapy for children, adolescents, and adults with severe disabilities, as well as a host of rehabilitative solutions for individuals from all backgrounds and levels of need. With 160 residents and 140 special education students, and providing more than 4,500 rehabilitative outpatient treatments every month, Negev Nachlat Eran is the largest rehabilitative community in Israel. The village significantly impacts the growth of the Negev region, attracting people from across Israel for employment and volunteering. At present, Negev Nachlat Eran employs over 500 professional staff and welcomes more than 800 volunteers each year. Thanks to a strong partnership with JNF-USA, more than 20,000 international guests have visited the village since 2004, and more than $35 million has been raised in JNF-related donations. We are presently in the final stages of construction for the Negev Nachlat Eran Neuro-Orthopedic Rehabilitative Hospital, the Negev's first ever rehabilitation hospital. Slated for completion in 2021, this cutting-edge $80 million project is a joint initiative of the Israeli government and JNF-USA. The hospital, which will feature 108 rehabilitative hospital beds and Israel's first translational research institute, will increase the number of Israel's rehabilitative hospital beds dramatically, bring quality care to the residents of the South, and create more housing and jobs in the Negev. Through partnerships with Ben Gurion University, the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, Johns Hopkins University, the Sheba Medical Center, the Weizmann Institute, and the Urbid University in Jordan, researchers at the hospital will study the trauma and recovery of everything from car accidents to COVID-19. In addition to enhancing care at Negev Nachlat Eran through the immediate implementation of research findings, the research will be shared with hospitals across the country and around the world to improve global best practices. Additionally, residential housing for employees, volunteers, and students is under construction in close proximity to the hospital. Within a decade, Negev Nachlat Eran will be a holistic center comprising the rehabilitation village and hospital, an international research center, and Merchavei Daniel, an inclusive town of 600 families who will welcome and embrace the village's residents as the heart and soul of their community.
Good evening. My name is Uri Geiger, and I'm the managing partner of ExcelMed, a private equity fund based in Miami, Florida, focusing on healthcare and specifically on healthcare technologies. I'm here today to present Dr. On and Poria Medical Center. Personally, I've been not only born, but I was raised in the center. My father was chair pediatric of the center for over 30 years. So I was raised in the center in the physician's quarantine. Educated there in my young age. My mother also worked in the same center and been around Poria for most of my life. My father died a couple of years ago, and Karen and myself were fortunate to donate Poria and help rename the pediatric department after my father. And we are very much involved in helping the center. Poria is a center in the north of Israel, near the Sea of Galilee. It's a rural area. It's far from all the big medical centers in Tel Aviv that provide the expensive medicine and have large donors. It serves underpaid population, Jewish and Arabs, kibbutz and villages, city of Tiberias, and the Golan Heights. We believe it's very important to help improve healthcare in the north of Israel, in the periphery, and not only in the center of Israel, where everybody likes to donate. It's kind of more common. I'm very pleasant to present today Dr. Erez On. Dr. On has been the chairman and CEO of the center since 2013. He's an orthopedic surgeon by education, has been a colonel with the Israeli army, has led the Israeli delegation to Mombasa, Kenya after the terror attack in 2002. Later, he became the vice chairman of Bellinstone Medical Center in Israel, so he could have his career and become a chair of one of the largest centers. But Dr. Erez On decided to dedicate his life to the north of Israel and to Poria, and joined Poria in 2013 and have done great things. So Erez, thank you for that, and the floor is yours.
Uri said, I'm the CEO of Poria Medical Center. Poria Medical Center located near Tiberias and the Sea of Galilee and serve the population in the east of Galilee. In the recent years, we have opened the centers of excellence to reduce the gaps in health services that exist in the north of Israel relative to the center. We have built a leading cardiovascular division, services for treatment and rehabilitation services for the northern Israel relative to the center. So the rate of rehabilitation bed, for example, in the north is a quarter or less than in the center. There is no rehabilitation services at all for children in the north. So residents in the north, especially children, do not receive rehabilitation care at the level exists in the center. So the Hemsley Rehabilitation Center that we build now will close those gaps. It is a 162 beds hospital that will contain departments for pediatric rehabilitation, neurological, orthopedic, geriatric, cardiac, pulmonary, and also a daycare department that will serve all the residents in the north. The rehabilitation center is scheduled to open in 2024. And also hundreds of new employees will work in the rehabilitation center and hopefully will move to the north. It will be also an academic and research center. So for us, it's a dream come true, and we need the support to make it happen.
Maybe you can tell us where the rehab center is now in terms of development stage, and where do you hope, or what do you believe you're going to open it, and what are the gaps of finance that you're looking now to close? Because the first questions that people ask, the government should pay for it. So where do you stand in terms of development, opening, and what are the financial gaps that you're hoping to close?
To finish the building in 2024, it means that in the mid-2024, we will start opening the departments. And we hope to finish it in two years from there. So it really, we are in the middle of the mission, and we had support of the government and also of Hemsley fund and also other funds, but still we need to complete the support of the rehabilitation center. So we will be able to open it as we planned.
I can only echo, and again, the mission is to help people at the far rural area of Israel where it's underserved. As Dr. On said, there is nothing in the north. I'm a friend from my Air Force squadron. His son is now, the family has been separated because the son and mother had to move to Ra'anana, near the only medical rehab center for kids in the center of Israel, Bet Levenstein. And there are a lot of stories of soldiers that got injured and cannot be treated next to their home, children, older population. There is a real need, a lot of support from donors from Israel, but mostly the US and JNF donors. And hopefully there'll be more support from people attending this event. Thank you very much.
You just heard and saw a little bit about two medical projects we are supporting in Israel. The closest medical facility to the Gaza envelope communities in southern Israel was over 90 minutes away. So in 2017, we opened a medical center in Halutza. The state-of-the-art 24-hour medical center in Halutza's Bnei Netzarim community provides an expanded range of services and saves lives in emergency situations. The center offers general family practice services and addresses light medical issues like setting broken bones and suturing and immediate care for emergency events, including heart failure, strokes, spurts, serious injuries, and snake and scorpion bites, until patients are stable enough to be taken to a hospital. We are now also building the Upper Eastern Galilee Medical Center, JNF-USA's third medical center, following our success in the Arava and Halutza regions in Israel's southern Negev. It will be the largest one to date and serve a broader population, including Kiryat Shmona and the surrounding region. This 20,000 square feet medical facility will include a 10,000 square foot emergency response center, followed by an additional 10,000 square foot for medical offices and specialists as phase 2. We have received the rights to the land and permitting is being approved now. We have raised north of $3.5 million out of $10 million for this project. In order to make this medical center and support the operation and growth of our other projects, we need to raise capital. The philanthropic investment will not only help provide medical care in areas of Israel that need it, but would also provide quality employment for hundreds of doctors and nurses, bringing new businesses to the region, people, and more. What JNF-USA is doing on the ground, the impact we're making, cannot happen without your support. I ask that if you haven't had the opportunity to make a meaningful gift this year to JNF-USA, now is the time. You can make a contribution at the link in the chat or let us know after the program to discuss a personal, corporate, or foundation gift. As always, we have a variety of naming opportunities and ways for your contribution to be part of a crowdfunding campaign we can set up with you. And now for today's main program, our moderator, Michael Margolis, RPH, is Oppenheimer's Senior Managing Director, co-head of healthcare and head of healthcare life sciences investment banking. He's also a special advisor to the OPY Acquisition Corp 1, to which he provides advice and access to his extensive network of healthcare company executives and buy-side relationships. Michael has more than 25 years experience in the life sciences sector with over 15 years as an investment banker. Prior to joining Oppenheimer, Michael served as the head of healthcare investment banking at Roth Capital Partners and as managing director at Merriman Curran Ford Group. Before becoming an investment banker, Michael worked in the pharmaceutical industry with several roles at Novartis Pharmaceuticals, including as a director in the Global Business Development and Licensing Group and at Eli Lilly as a senior pharmaceutical representative. He also served as a buy-side equity research analyst at Orsos Capital. Mr. Margolis is a registered pharmacist and holds an MBA from New York University Stern School of Business and a pharmacy degree from Rutgers University College of Pharmacy. Our panelists include Dr. Ben Zeskind, co-founded Immuneering in 2008 with the goal of leveraging high-throughput data to improve pharma research and development. He is an inventor and numerous patents assigned to both Immuneering partners and the company itself. Dr. Zeskind has published extensively in high-impact peer-reviewed journals. He trained at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, earning a PhD in bioengineering in 2006 and an SB in electrical engineering and computer science in 2003. He also earned an MBA at Harvard Business School in 2008, where he was recognized as a Baker Scholar, the highest award distinction. Dvir Cohen is CEO and president of Mimic Innovative Surgery, a unique and innovative company with game-changing technology in surgical robotics. Over the past 15 years, he has led innovative robotic initiatives in the health and intelligence markets worldwide. Prior to joining Mimic, he led an excellent career path of growth, serving in an elite technology unit in Israeli intelligence, from mechanical engineer to R&D robotics manager. He led multidisciplinary teams, developed and manufactured dozens of breakthrough optomechanical disruptive solutions in small series and scale-up quantities. Dvir received honors and awards for managing a robotic project that won the Israel Defense Award and also Outstanding Officer Award by the Israel Chief of General Staff. He He earned an MBA from Reconati Business School at Tel Aviv University with a major in business strategy and entrepreneurship. He's also a graduate of the Brakim, Program for Excellence in the Technion, holding a Bachelor's of Science and Master Science degrees in Mechanical Engineering. Mitchell S. Steiner, MD, has served as President and Chief Executive Officer of Baruch and as a Director since October 2016. Dr. Steiner was previously the co-founder of Aspen Park and served as Aspen Park's Chief Executive Officer, President, and Vice Chairman of the Board. Dr. Steiner was a consultant and then the President, Urology, and member of Senior Management of OPCO Health, had responsibilities for the launch, marketing, sales, and reimbursement of 4Kscore prostate cancer tests to urologists and primary care physicians. Dr. Steiner was also the co-founder of GTX Inc., a men's health and oncology public company where he served as Chief Executive Officer and Vice Chairman of the Board of Directors. Dr. Steiner is a board-certified urologist and a fellow of the American College of Surgeons and has held numerous academic appointments, including Assistant Professor of Urology, Cell Biology, and Pathology at Vanderbilt School of Medicine and Chairman and Professor of Urology, Director of Urologic Oncology and Research, and the Chair of Excellence in Urologic Oncology at the University of Tennessee. Dr. Steiner holds a BA in Molecular Biology and Chemistry from the Vanderbilt University and an MD from the University of Tennessee. He performed his surgical and urologic training at the Johns Hopkins Hospital and postdoctoral research fellow in cell biology at Vanderbilt School of Medicine. Dr. Sharon Shaham co-founded Karyopharm in 2008 and has served as Chief Scientific Officer since December 2012. She was previously President of Research and Development, President and Chief Executive Officer. Prior to joining Karyopharm, Dr. Shaham served as Senior Vice President of Drug Development at Epix Pharmaceuticals, Inc., and Director, Algorithm and Software Development at Predix Pharmaceuticals, Inc., which merged into Epix Pharmaceuticals in 2006, and where she led the company's efforts in GPCR modeling, computational chemistry, lead optimization, and development of clinical trials. Dr. Shaham holds a Bachelor in Science in Chemistry, a Doctor of Philosophy in Chemistry, and a Master's of Business Administration from Tel Aviv University. And now, enjoy the wonderful insights from this incredibly impressive panel.
It's an honor to be moderating today's panel on life sciences innovation, hosted by Jewish National Fund, USA. I'd like to ask each of you to please take a moment and tell us about your journey and what brought you to your current venture. What are you and your team focused on today?
My journey is, I would say, I took the long way to get to where I am eventually got to. And what I mean by that is I'm a medical person, but instead of figuring out early on that we potentially can do more good, go after 100,000 patients or more with good science and good drugs, I took the long way. So in other words, I started out as a pure academic guy. I went to medical school, went to urology training for 7 years. I was at Vanderbilt on faculty, and then became chairman of urology at University of Tennessee. So I was in my 30s by the time I figured out that I needed to go into business. And so a lot of people get that opportunity right out of college, and it took me a long time. So in 1997, I started my first publicly traded company, and what led me to go from academics and research to actually opening up a business was all of the limitations that one will have as being part of a university and trying to do drug development. Drug development does not happen in universities. Discovery happens. And so I learned very quickly that the only way to get the resources and to get the talent was to actually start a company. So that's what we did with the company called GTX. We started in 97 and went public in 2004. The second part of the journey was then to recognize that the whole pathway to get drugs to patients takes time, takes money, and there's a lot of ups and downs. And there's never a straight line. So if you ever see anybody who's been successful and they said it was a straight line, not true. I would say the strength of the journey is going to be recognizing your mistakes, capitalizing on your successes, being resilient and persevering. because if you do those things and you just keep looking past, bad luck can be turned to good luck, and good luck can be turned to better luck. And so from that standpoint, my journey was that after starting that company in 2014, making a decision that I wanted to again expand even further, we started a company called Viru. That's a publicly traded company in Miami as the headquarters, and we're focused on oncology products, particularly prostate cancer and breast cancer, and each of these products are late stage. And so all of the concepts here is, again, how do we get life-saving drugs, life-changing drugs to patients? And as a physician, and that's the road that I started, it was one patient at a time. With drug development, it's thousands of patients at a time. It's much more rewarding.
Thank you, Michael. So my PhD was in computational biophysics, in which I developed an algorithm, essentially an AI system, to predict the structure of proteins and use those to develop drugs in a much faster and more efficient way. You can think about it that if you know the structure of the protein is like understanding the lock, and then you can easily find smarter keys for these locks. And we did a lot of it on the computer, which saved a lot of time and money of lab work. My PhD was the basis for my first company, Epic Pharmaceuticals, in which we used this algorithm that I developed to identify novel drugs for several targets, many of them reached clinical trials. When I started Biopharm in 2009, I took a similar approach, but in this case, it was in an oncology space, and we chose a very unique target. We chose to modulate nuclear export. And why is it important? Because in cancer cells, in all cancer cells, essentially, there is DNA damage, which allows for this uncontrolled replication that we all know that cancer cells go through. Nature actually put a lot of mechanisms to prevent that. And there is a whole set of proteins that are called the guardians of the genome. They're like editors that sit on the DNA, and they're supposed to raise a flag if the DNA is damaged and say, hey, this is a cancer cell. This cell needs to die. But cancer cell is smart, and what it does is it exports this protein outside of the nucleus, and then it's a chef that is outside the kitchen. They can't do their job. My idea when I started the company was that if we will block this nuclear export, we will have the guardians of the genome back near the DNA where they are supposed to. They will identify cancer cells as being damaged cells, and they will cause cancer cells. And that's what really happened. So started the company in 2009, and then we had our Series A in 2010. We dosed the first patient in 2012, which is a very scary moment in which you take a new chemical entity, a drug that never existed before, you give that to a person. And this is one of these cases that no good is good, no news is good news. And it also speaks for the courageous patients that are agreeing to participate in this study. So that was in 2012. And the drug was approved in 2019 in the US for the treatment of patients with relapsed refractory multiple myeloma. And then a year after that, it was approved for patients with relapsed refractory DLBCL, which is a kind of lymphoma. And since then, it was approved again, this time in combination in earlier setting myeloma. It is approved now in 52 countries, including the US, many of the countries in Europe, China, Singapore, and Israel. And this is what we do at Biopharm. And right now our team is thinking, okay, what's next for selinexor or our drug? And we know it's active in many other tumors, and it can potentially help many other patients. And what we are trying to do is get it approved in other indications and help as many patients as we can.
Thank you, Michael, for the great opportunity to be here. I am Devir, the CEO and co-founder of the company. I've been many years in the Israeli Ministry of Defense to develop fine robotic systems, sub-micron accuracy, and articulate instrumentations. And in course of duty, I met with a professor that had a revolutionary idea to develop robotic systems that had fingers to make it easier for surgeons to grasp different tissues. And after talking to a lot of surgeons, I understand they want to feel immersed in the surgical field. So in fact, I've developed a robotic system that have the entire upper extremity of shoulder, elbow, and wrist with more than 360 degrees of rotation and articulation to reach everywhere in the abdominal cavity. And I've decided that I want to develop something that no one else can do and enable surgical procedures that are non-feasible to date. So after talking to gynecologists, urologists, general surgeons, I saw a statement from the ACOG, which is the American Congress of Gynecologists, stating that vaginal approach to hysterectomy should be performed whenever feasible. And I asked one of the surgeons, what do you mean whenever feasible? If that's the approach of choice, why won't you just use it in all of your cases? And he said, of course, it's a better way to do surgeries, but I can do it only in 10 to 15% of cases. And I've told them, we have developed a robotic system that is truly enabling, allows you to do surgeries that are non-feasible to date. So we are the first in the world robotic platform that is cleared for transvaginal procedures in the abdominal cavity.
Thank you for having me on the panel. And because we're a public company, I need to remind everyone that we'll be making forward-looking statements today. So please see our public disclosures for more information. So I started Immuneering 14 years ago in 2008. And our goal was really to look at super responders, to look at that small subset of cancer patients who are having these incredible, durable, complete responses where the tumors would go away and they wouldn't come back. And we said, if we could just understand better what's happening in those patients that's not happening in everyone else, well, then we could figure out how to make that happen in more people. We could figure out how to achieve broad activity. So I had done my PhD at MIT, and a lot of our early team were MIT alums. So of course we took a data-driven bioinformatics approach to this challenge. And we really spent the first decade of the company on the first part of that, on understanding why patients were responding differently to medicines. We partnered with a number of pharmaceutical companies and really applied transcriptomics and genomics to better understand the mechanisms that were causing some patients to respond and others not to. And over the course of this work, we learned a number of surprising things, of counterintuitive lessons. And ultimately, over time, we built up a computational platform that incorporated some of these counterintuitive lessons and let us essentially identify novel biology as well as novel chemistry and do translational planning in a fairly unique way. So about 4 years ago, we said we can take this platform and start working on the second part of the goal. We'd already understood better why some patients were responding, but now how do we use that knowledge to achieve broader activity? So about 4 years ago, we started developing our own pipeline of wholly owned drug programs using our platform to essentially identify new insights. And that's gone extremely well. So today, our lead product candidate, which is called IMM-1104, is on track to file the IND in the third quarter of this year and enroll our first patient in a clinical trial in the fourth quarter of this year. And it's really amassed a pretty remarkable preclinical data package in animal models. So what we see, and I should mention 104 is for cancers driven by activation of the MAP kinase pathway. This is a pathway that includes RAS, RAF, MEK, and it's responsible for driving about half of all solid tumors. So, you want broad activity, you want to go after large patient populations with solid tumors. This is the place to start. And what we've seen is pretty remarkable in the animal models. We've seen a broad activity that really doesn't appear to depend on which specific mutation is driving the activation of the MAP kinase pathway. So we see tumor growth inhibition in a KRAS G12C mutant pancreatic cancer model, and we see it in a KRAS G12S mutant lung cancer model, KRAS G12D mutant colorectal cancer model, as well as NRAS and BRAF mutant melanoma models. So just really nice tumor growth inhibition. Combined with good tolerability, we've seen no more than 3 to 5% body weight loss in these animals, and so that's for me, having started the company with this goal of broad activity, it's really gratifying to see that kind of animal data showing that we're inhibiting tumor growth regardless of which specific mutation is activating the MAP kinase pathway.
The pandemic will surely have long-term impact on healthcare. Having innovative healthcare industry leaders of your caliber around this panel discussion is a great opportunity to hear each of your visions for healthcare and the role of biotech, artificial intelligence, diagnostics, therapeutics, vaccine development, and other critical areas of the healthcare industry. Could you each share your thoughts with us about the long-term impact?
I'm very fortunate at Viru. We're doing more than just sharing our thoughts. We're actually doing something. And one of the things that we did is we were incredibly opportunistic at the beginning of the pandemic. When we started seeing COVID-19 cases go up and deaths go up and people were panicking, the world was in shutdown. At that point, we recognized that one of our cancer drugs, the drug that we're using for prostate cancer, had the ability to go after, and just bear with me with the science for a moment, microtubules, which is the highway within the cell by which things move around to get into the nucleus to replicate. And it turns out viruses are not really alive. What they do is they attack the cell and they hijack the cell's machinery so that they can replicate themselves. And they do that by traveling on this highway. So we had a drug that disrupts that highway. And we said, well, if that's the case, then they have a drug that disrupts the highway. It could be antiviral and also can be an anti-inflammatory. It had dual effect and was an oral agent. And our thinking at the time was that if it's a cancer, if it's being developed as a cancer agent, maybe we should start with the sickest patients. So remember that at the beginning of the pandemic, everybody was slapping every drug they can get their hands on against COVID-19. The biggest push was to go after a vaccine, go after an antibody drug, or take drugs that are already approved and repurpose them. And that's where all the resources went. While everybody was doing that, we were in the background saying, we've got preclinical data that we're anti-inflammatory, antiviral, and what we're going to do is go right into patients. So we talked to the FDA, and let me tell you, the FDA was incredibly receptive and expeditious during the pandemic. And we started a phase 2 study, and the phase 2 study was to go after patients in a hospitalized setting. And just to pause for a moment, that in the pandemic is still the area that we do not have effective drugs. We have drugs pre-hospitalization. We have antibody drugs, again, that help with pre-hospitalization, but in the hospital setting, other than dexamethasone, really there's not much. And so we thought that we'd go after that. So we did a study, 20 patients per arm, blinded. These are patients who are standard of care. These are patients who are hospitalized on oxygen, slipping to death. And the death rate was pretty high. As you remember, at the beginning of the pandemic, we were approaching 30–40% deaths, and we were able to reduce deaths by 81%. So an 81% absolute relative reduction in deaths. And again, you can't fake a death. So it's a hard endpoint. It's not like trying to get a patient out of the hospital in 2 days, and people can get rid of a bed because they need that for somebody sicker. Here it was deaths. And based on that data, we started a phase 3 clinical study. It's ongoing as we speak right now. And that study is in 210 patients globally. So in South America, Mexico, US, and Europe. And if we're successful in that clinical study, then we'll be the first agent that doesn't require cold storage. It's an oral agent you can take by mouth. It's not an infusion. It can be given in a hospital setting. You can take by backpack to remote areas of the world. It can be stockpiled. And so we feel that, as a local company, we've done more than just sit back and say, what are we going to do about the pandemic? And one of the things I said in one of my earnings call was somebody said, it takes a long time to do drug development. This is now COVID-19. Do you think that the pandemic will come and go and this will be irrelevant? I said, no, I think there'll be COVID-19. I hear you, but there's going to be COVID-20, COVID-21, COVID-22. And I stopped at COVID-22 because really in 2022, we're still going to be worrying about coronavirus. But guess what? We are. And so it doesn't look like it's going away. Right now, Europe is showing an increase. Asia is just rampant with COVID, and a new variant, BA2, has come through. Now it's starting to show up in the US. I'm afraid another wave is coming. We need effective therapies in the hospital and the hospitalized setting to prevent patients from dying. And we're hoping to play a role in helping in that setting.
The BioTech The pandemic actually had significant impact on any part of drug development. But more importantly, it shows us that when needed, biotech and pharma and regulators can, and hospitals, very importantly, can partner and quickly identify solutions globally. It is the vaccines that were developed, if we'll think about it, within a year, we had vaccine and we kept improving the vaccine that essentially saved not only lives, but also quality of life. But for those of us that are not in the developing medicine for COVID, it still had an impact on every part of how we work. At the beginning, our patients didn't have access for masks, especially outside of the US. And what we did at Karyopharm is we actually imported masks and gloves and sanitary, other sanitary equipment and provide them for our hospitals so patients can come up to just receive their drugs and see their doctors because they couldn't even get them. It also changed the way patients are seeing their doctors because what we learned is that maybe it's nicer for patients to actually sit in their home, in their safe space, and discuss with their doctor in a less sterile environment, have their members near them, especially when they need to hear bad news. So there is a whole research now that is going, is how do we really use telemedicine, even in the oncology setting, in which in the past it was really you need to see the patient every time. We need to learn how to do clinical trials when we don't have access to the hospital. Until now, every data, we actually have someone that comes and visits and make sure that the charts are okay and everything is okay. We can't do that anymore in many hospitals, still in Europe, and we learn how to do that remotely. And we learn to build a whole other mechanism of how to conduct the clinical trials without being on the day-to-day at the hospital. More importantly, we also learn and we know, and we'll talk about it when we talk about the cost of drugs, that regulatory actions and ethics committees and IRBs can work much, much faster and can make their processes lighter when there is a need. And we need to ask ourselves, if we can approve drugs for COVID within a year or two, why can't we do it for all drugs? Why does it still take us years, in average about 10 years, to get a new drug on the market? And I think this is some of the long-term things that we will have to think post the pandemic.
I think the starting point is the market has changed. Everyone are staying at home more. Patients don't want to come to the hospital. They want to move away from where the COVID patients are. So they're trying to find other treatments, more AI, home care. And when it comes to surgeries, of course, not doing the surgeries in the hospital, going to an ambulatory surgery centers. So that started something about moving to ambulatory surgery centers about 10 years ago or 7 years ago. It started then and it's accelerated significantly and really accelerated based on the pandemic. And I think the companies that identify that and build their model, both their business model and the technology, to capture that market, to offer better patient outcomes in those centers, taking the technology to the patient's home, taking the technology to the ambulatory surgery centers, so the patient will go home the same day after surgery, that's where the companies will eventually succeed. And I think the companies that did that and made good progress towards that, this is where the market is going. And I can share that in our approach, the fact that our technology is so different and so unique that our system, the robotic system, is humanoid, meaning the position technology, well, in surgeries, you have to do basically positioner graspers to dissect and move the tissue. In our technology, the positioner technology is based on shoulder, elbow, and wrist scaled down that fit inside the abdominal cavity. So outside of the patient, the capital equipment is about this size. I can literally hold it with my bare hands. So the capital equipment is very small, a fraction of the price of other systems, highly mobile, and much easier to use. So all of a sudden, the ambulatory surgery centers, it was considered the holy grail for surgical robotics, was all of a sudden it's feasible. So I think the way that we've built our technology and we refine our model, our business model, to address that market as well. That's something that we're very proud of.
First of all, I think it's incredible what's been accomplished during the pandemic in terms of the vaccines that have been created, as well as the treatments, and just the speed at which that's happened. The speed at which this industry has been able to generate effective and safe vaccines and treatments for COVID-19. I think if you had asked prior to the pandemic, no one would have believed that speed was really possible. And I think that's great. I think it encourages everyone to take a fresh look at this industry and really the positive impact that we can have on society. And I think it's also encouraging people to sort of rethink old dogma in different areas as well. From our perspective, no one should be dying of cancer in 2022, right? Cancer doesn't work by magic. It's not some paranormal force. It operates by a set of biological mechanisms that are actually really well understood. And yet it's been really challenging to develop effective medicines. And one of the main reasons for that is cancer essentially takes the rest of the body hostage. So it's really good at hiding among healthy cells. And so what that means is it's really easy to make a medicine that'll kill cancer cells in a dish in vitro. What's really hard is to kill the cancer cells, but not hurt the healthy cells in the body. And threading that needle is really the key challenge. That's called therapeutic index. And so I think that's where we've had a fairly unique approach. So, prior to what we're doing, the way the most exciting way that people have achieved therapeutic index for the MAP kinase pathway has been to go after a specific mutation. So there's great therapies developed by Amgen and Mirati called KRAS G12C inhibitors. And they go after a very specific mutation in KRAS called G12C. And that's exquisitely precise, right? It spares the healthy cells because they don't have that mutation. So it's really a great advance. But the challenge is only a limited number of patients have that specific mutation, the G12C. And in fact, we've heard kind of heartbreaking stories from physicians about patients who have a different mutation, maybe G12D or G12V, and the drug won't work for them, but they don't understand that, and they want to enroll in the G12C inhibitor trials, and the physicians have to explain to them it's not going to work. So we wanted to create a drug for the MAP kinase pathway that wasn't specific to any mutation, because the other challenge with going after a specific mutation is you get acquired resistance. When you create a selective pressure against a single mutation, the tumor can mutate again and essentially find a way around it. And so what 104 does, our lead product candidate, is we believe it achieves its therapeutic index in a totally new way, which is we take advantage not of a specific mutation, but the fact that the cancer cell needs the MAP kinase pathway to be on all the time. Cancer cells are constantly growing and dividing, and they're kind of frenetic. And so the pathway has to be at a high level all the time. Whereas healthy cells use the pathway in a more moderate and more intermittent way. It's off, then it's on, then it's off. So 104, we believe, provides this deep but cyclic inhibition, where essentially we hit the tumor hard for a short amount of time and then release. And so that deprives the tumors of the sustained high level of signaling that they need to grow and be cancerous, whereas it gives the healthy cells enough MAP kinase pathway signaling to be less affected than kind of the traditional approach. And we believe that's why we're seeing in the animal models such good tumor growth inhibition combined with good tolerability. So we like to think that just as prior to the pandemic, no one could have envisioned having such effective vaccines and treatments so quickly. We aspire to hopefully in a few years, have cancer be, have durable complete responses to cancer be much more common than they are today. So that's our goal.
I think, first of all, the story that the company that you run, Ben, is I think it's exactly where the market is going and how the pandemic eventually is just the tip of the iceberg of the next generation of medical treatment. And I think this is the exact type of accomplishment that we need to move forward at the medical sector and as a society.
Well, Devere, I think what you're doing is so critical as well, because look, I mean, the first step with any cancer patient, if it's caught in time, is surgery, right? And if you can remove the tumor through surgery, that's obviously a great first step. So it sounds to me like, over time your system could really help enable that to be done more effectively. So I think it's great we can attack the problem from multiple
two sides.
Yeah.
What are the main roadblocks you've seen in the process of developing your technology in clinical development? Is it funding? Is it regulatory approvals? What can you share with us?
Again, one of the reasons I went from academics into industry is because I recognized very, very quickly that discovery cannot make it to the patient's bedside with the infrastructure or the resources that are available to academic laboratories. It's just not enough. It will take something in the order of $500 million to $1 billion for a drug to successfully make it through all of the steps for it to be at the patient's bedside. That's a lot of money. And that money also takes into account all the failures that happen along the way as well. And so in order to get that kind of money, you need investment and you need public money, and if you can get grants, that's great, but the grants are never going to be enough. And that is the engine. That's the engine that you have to fuel with the resources. Now, regulatory is tough, but I will tell you, in the United States, we have the best, in my opinion, the best regulatory agency in the world. And that's why if something gets approved in the US, 80% of the world's regulatory bodies will accept the NDA, the new drug application from the US, because that's how well the world views our current FDA in terms of credibility. And I mean, no other country has that. So with that said, they're very good in their science. They're very good in terms of understanding what steps you need to take. Sometimes they're a little too conservative because they have to worry about safety and not just efficacy. So it's a very healthy dialogue and balance. And I wouldn't call it a hurdle. I think it's a necessary evil in order to unleash safe drugs that are effective, or effective drugs that have a safety profile that balances the effect that it provides. So if I had to pick one thing, I would say it's resources. It's just, unfortunately, it's resource. You can't fix time. It takes time. Sometimes it can take 10 years, 15 years to move a product. And so most industries, they come up with a widget. You sell the widget, you make the money, you show you have a profit, you can sell your company based on that profit. But in biotech and in the drug industry, it's all front loaded. You're making no money at the beginning and everybody's throwing money at you, hoping that in the future there'll be a return, and they may not be. It's a very different business model. And a lot of people get very uneasy because they can't look at the usual numbers and say, it's growing, it's got a profit, this is what the EBITDA is, this is what the gross profit. Can't say that. Our company is fortunate that we do have revenue, we do have products, and so we do have part of that. But the part of our company that's going to be the biggest part of what we contribute, both from a standpoint of mankind and from a return on investment, is going to be the drug pipeline. And the drug pipeline is focused on oncology and breast cancer and prostate cancer, as mentioned, COVID-19. If any one of those drugs hit, then any money that's been invested in this company will have a very nice return.
Well, first we have to say biology is very complicating. The science in oncology and care is changed so much in the last 10 years and advanced so much. But still, for most cancers, we don't have cures. For most cancer, patients die from their cancer, not from age. So we still have a lot to go there. But it becomes much more difficult and much more personalized. And I think, especially in oncology, we will move from chemotherapy, which I hope when our kids will look at what we did, they'll think that we were barbaric to give people chemotherapy and we'll be done with it completely. But until then, we will move from chemotherapy for now drugs that are impacting our big targets and are still not tailored for the patient, to the situation that we will really understand the patient disease, the genomics, and at the gene level and the protein level, and we will tailor medicine for each patient. So if we cannot cure the cancer, at least we will move it into a chronic disease. And that will happen with time, I'm sure. And I think when we look back in 10 years on how we look at medicine today, it will look completely different. Now in oncology, we are benefiting from the fact that we actually can see the disease. For most patients with cancer, we take a sample of the disease and we understand it. When we look at other diseases, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, we can take someone's brain sample, doesn't work yet. So we don't really understand the biology of the disease as it's happening in the patient's life. And I think as we move to better imaging and better technology, we will be able to apply some of the technology that we are using for oncology now in other diseases, most importantly in neurological disorders. And I hope to see a lot of advances in this field as well. We also need to work on the regulatory area, which I find is challenging as the philosophy and the strategy of Europe is different than the US and different from other parts of the world. And we actually see that the FDA is building partnership with other agencies like with Canada and Australia now, so we can get one approval and not have to do it one by one in each region or in each country. And I think that will accelerate getting medicine to patients globally.
When I literally started, no one thought it's feasible. No one thought there could be a robotic system, small and flexible enough to go through a natural orifice and reach regions that are non-feasible to date. And the surgeon said, what do you mean retroflex and working toward a point of entry? How can you do that? And when I told him I can go through a natural orifice, for example, going through a transvaginal canal into the abdominal cavities all the way to the gallbladder, that's something that no one thought that there's a route in the patient anatomy that can fulfill that. So when I started, and that surgeon told me that he can do it only in 10% of cases, I told him with our system, you can bend, you can move around, and you can reach those regions that are anatomically challenging today. And he said, this is a great idea. It's phenomenal. In fact, most of my colleagues used to work from the abdomen, doing puncture wounds in the abdomen, start from the top, moving down to the bottom, to the cervix. And I've told them our system is disruptive. It should enable you to do things much, much easier. So we go transvaginally and marry all the benefits of a transvaginal access, retroflex toward the point of entry, so the surgeon feels like she's inserted the instruments from the abdomen, but without the puncture within the abdomen. So the learning curve is actually within minutes. So I think the main roadblock as a starting point was no one thought it's feasible. No one thought that you can build a system that can do those movements and actually manipulate tissues. And after we did, and I've built a proof of concept at the technological incubator, when we wanted to go for the regulatory approvals with the FDA, they told us, well, the technology is amazing, but we cannot compare you to anything out there from a technology point of view. So you're not a 510K, and we cannot really compare you to anyone else from an access point of view, because everyone are doing incisions in the abdomen. Who thought that you can do a surgery in the abdomen without cutting the abdomen open? So both from access and technology point of view, we cannot compare it to anything. Therefore, you're classified as a de novo technology. And I thought it's great. I came to all of our board members and our investors and told them, listen, this is another validation that we are disruptive, that there's nothing out there that can do what we do. So I think as long that you have the good technology and the good people around the table to brainstorm, come up with a pathway and focus on execution, the technology hurdles, the regulatory hurdles, the financing hurdles are eventually something that you can overcome.
Devere, I love that story because like you said, it was something that the surgeon said they could do on their own 10% of the time, and you figured out how to make that much more repeatable with that amazing technology. So that really resonates. That's a great story.
Thank you.
For us, I think there were, and it's not just us. It's really for all of cancer drug development. I think the challenge and the challenge of why don't we have better cancer medicines already, and why is it so difficult, to achieve this therapeutic index, hit the cancer cells hard and not harm the healthy cells. It's really because we're dealing with two forms of complexity, right? The biology is complex and the drug development process is complex, and they're complex in two very different ways. And so, I think that's the challenge that we and all drug developers really have faced. Now, the complexity of the biology, that's something we're able to address with bioinformatics and with our proprietary platform. So this deep cyclic inhibition approach that we take with 104, that really came from our disease canceling technology platform, where we essentially looked at, there was a prior generation of drugs against the MAP kinase pathway called MEK inhibitors that essentially had chronic inhibition. They shut down the pathway 24/7, which did help address the cancer, but also caused quite severe toxicity. And so we looked at the gene expression profiles induced by these first generation MEK inhibitors, and we found something really counterintuitive. We found that at 3 hours and at 6 hours, it made sense. The changes in gene expression that these first generation MEK inhibitors were inducing were actually counteracting or canceling out disease associated changes. So literally genes upregulated with disease would be downregulated by the first generation MEK inhibitors, or vice versa. But by 24 hours, it was the complete opposite. And this was really surprising. At 24 hours, we actually saw that the first generation MEK inhibitors were amplifying disease associated gene expression changes. And we said, whoa, that's not good. And so that really led us to, that was a way that our platform, our disease canceling technology, sort of cut through all the data and showed us something counterintuitive about the complexity of the biology that ultimately led us to create the deep cyclic inhibition. So that's the complexity of the biology. But then you also have the complexity of the drug development process, which is very different. I mean, this involves chemistry and translating first from in vitro models in a dish to animal models to humans. And there we were really fortunate because our chief scientific officer, Brett Hall, has spent his whole career studying what's called translational medicine, which is essentially the study of the drug development process and how you increase the likelihood of success as you transition from one phase to another. So he actually started his career building these humanized three-dimensional tumor growth assays as a professor at Ohio State. And they were doing a much better job than kind of 2D cell culture dishes of predicting what was going to happen in animals. That got the attention of J&J, and he went to J&J and rose through the ranks there, and onto other pharma companies. But so he's spent decades studying this, this translational medicine. How do you manage the complexity of the drug development process and increase the likelihood of success at each stage? And so the combination of that translational science approach, which can help address the complexity of drug development with the bioinformatics approach and the platform that we have to help address the complexity of the biology, that we've seen to be really, really powerful. And I think that's what's helped to drive 104.
You're all working hard to find solutions to tackle diseases and the current pandemic and help us prepare for the next one, whatever that may be or what it looks like. What are your thoughts on what we need to do better to be prepared for the next one? Can we fix global healthcare access? And what is it going to take?
Great question. And I think we have to always look at history and what happened during the pandemic. We were not ready for this pandemic. Okay, we just were not. And in all fairness, the last major one to hit us was in the Spanish flu back in 1917, 1918, 1919. And that was so long ago that, most people that were alive at that period of time are just not around now. So there's essentially no memory, no company memory of what happened before. It was just from the textbooks. And so what did we get right? The government quickly mobile, and I'm just talking from a medical standpoint. The government took resources, significant resources, and plowed them into a vaccine program, and that played out. The negative there is we didn't realize that even with being vaccinated, you would also be able to still get COVID. It may be less, but some people are still killing them. But that's a weird concept that you get vaccinated, you're still at risk. And as the virus mutates, you can get more aggressive strains. You still can be at risk. So the vaccines aren't 100%. But the success was we understood, we learned from that, we put the machinery in place. Biotechnology came to the rescue. Private enterprise came to the rescue, and the government-private interactions worked. Okay. Now, where it fell apart was that it didn't translate, or should I say, didn't transition. That once we had a vaccine, I would say there was a positive investment in effective drugs, because what we're learning now is that it's not just a vaccine and trying to prevent it, but how do you take care of the patients that are so far gone or have immunocompromised or have comorbidities that puts them at risk, and they can't really have an effective vaccine. And these are the patients that are unfortunately dying in the hospitals now. To put that in perspective, even today as we speak, about 1,300 to 1,500 deaths are occurring every day. And of 9/11, we lost 2,900 people, and that was incredibly catastrophic. We're losing 1,300 to 1,500 people a day. And that translates to about 600,000 to 700,000 people will die this year. That is a big number. And that's because we don't have effective drugs in a hospital setting. And so where we need to be better prepared for the future pandemic is to make sure that we don't put our guard down. The fact that Congress just recently did not appropriate $22.5 billion into COVID therapies, and we're going to fall short again. I mean, and with this BA2 variant coming, we need that money. Now, fortunately for us in our company, we recognize that effective therapies still exist. Still need to exist. The FDA has fast-tracked our program, which means they also agree that a hospitalized setting, taking care of patients to prevent death, is still an unmet medical need. And they fast-tracked this, meaning that they will do everything in their power to help us get this, if the drug shows good efficacy and safety, to get this to patients. And so what we need to do the next time around is start to stockpile across the world the medicines that are effective, and stockpile vaccines. And I think just like the flu vaccine, the COVID vaccine is going to have to be updated. And I know the flu vaccine is once a year, but it feels with COVID, it may be once every 6 months. Think about that for a moment, because the antibodies go down so quickly. And we may be in store for a 6-month booster for the rest of our lives, because the strain keeps changing. It just doesn't feel like it's going away. And so that has to be done. I think, again, the advantage of what we have for stockpiling, it's hard to stockpile drugs that require cold storage or have to be infused. I mean, that, short shelf life, that's a problem. Again, the drug that we're developing is a room temperature drug. It's a small molecule, it's a capsule, doesn't require refrigeration, can be given orally. If we're successful, that's the ideal drug to stockpile. And it's ideal because the patients that you're going to be most worried about, the ones that are dying and overwhelming the hospital system. And right now the hospital system is so fatigued from one pandemic wave after the next. So I think more resources have to go into effective drugs. More resources have to go into being able to detect the next strain before it comes. And I think we need to replicate the model with the biotech government collaborations that were responsible for the successes. And unfortunately, it's also going to be the lack of government working with biotech is going to be responsible for the lack of preparedness going forward.
We have to fix global healthcare. As we now know, patient in the US, patient in Israel, or we are all third-time and fourth-time vaccinated. There are still places that got two, and enough places that you didn't get any vaccine, or you didn't get the best vaccine you can get. And we need to find to somehow get the cost of healthcare to that level that patients throughout the world get access to modern medicine. We see that even with cancer care, in which there are regions that while we can do clinical studies, we don't do them because the healthcare system there is not comparable to the US. And then the learning from such a system will not apply to patients in the US. And I think as pharma developers and biotech developers agencies are looking at a more global solution, we have to make it more that clinical studies will happen throughout the world in all regions, and also be that the results of it provide access to patients throughout the world. This is my dream, and there are many people that are now thinking about it and building technologies that will help us do that.
I think eventually we need synergy. It's a synergy between systems. We need better access to healthcare in patients' homes, better access to patient data, and just better synergy between the systems. Digital health, that's something that grows tremendously in the last couple of years. But I think marrying that with AI and helping the patients to get better decisions early on in the disease state will help us move forward. But I think it can also help us going from an earlier stages of the disease to the right treatment at a hospital and just better recovery. So I think finding a way to have synergy between the systems, patient data and data protection, and securing the patient data to the right needs, that's the key to help us move forward to the next stages. And this is where the market is going now.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I would just add, I think continued investment in science and innovation at all stages of the process, right? So, the work that we do, of course, builds on a huge amount of basic science research, that has helped establish the mechanisms of cancer and the biology of cancer. So, I think that that kind of investment that societies and governments make in funding basic science is really critical. I hope that for society at large, seeing the impact that vaccines and medicines have had in the pandemic, I hope that kind of gives everyone fresh eyes to look at how societies make these investments in innovation, and then of course as that progresses to to companies and innovation as we get closer to treatments, whether it's amazing surgical technologies like Devere described, or the kinds of medicines that we're developing. I mean, I think all these things, it's all the same goal, right? Help people that are sick, right? Help people to feel better and to be well. And I think that's something that we all can value and agree on.
Thank you all for your time today.
ישראל ממשיך